Picture the most high-stakes boxing ring imaginable.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It's like late April, early May 2026. The stadium lights are just glaring. The crowd is deafening.
Mhm.
And right there in the center of the canvas, the reigning heavyweights of AI are already in there throwing these massive multi-billion-dollar haymakers.
It is an incredibly bruising market right now, for sure.
Yeah, you've got, GPT 5.5, Claude Opus 4.7, Gemini 3.1 Pro just battering each other for enterprise supremacy.
Right.
And then the arena music shifts. A new challenger slips through the ropes. It's GROK 4.3.
Yep, the wild card.
Exactly. But instead of just, throwing a punch, GROK drops a 40% price cut onto the mat, winks at the corporate sponsors, and just completely upends the entire business model of the fight.
It's the kind of disruptive entrance that forces every other fighter to stop and basically check their own gloves.
Yeah. And so that is exactly what this deep dive is all about today. Our mission is to build a firewall against the noise for you.
Because there's so much noise.
So much. Because the reality is, whenever Elon Musk's XAI announces a new model, the internet instantly fractures.
Oh, completely.
Like half your feed is this breathless utopian hype, and the other half is just apocalyptic skepticism.
And neither of those extremes actually helps you build a business.
Right. Or do your job. So today, we're stripping away the emotion. We are relying on cold, hard data to understand the architecture behind GROK 4.3, how it performs on the brutal benchmarks, where its blind spots are, and, ultimately whether you should actually be using it.
Which, at the end of the day, is the only metric that matters.
Exactly.
But to understand how this model fights, you really have to look at where it trains first.
Okay, yeah. Take us to the training camp.
Right, because you have to look at the sheer physics of XAI's infrastructure right now. It is staggering.
The scale is almost hard to comprehend. Based on their December 2025 funding round, we are looking at a company valued at what? $50 billion?
$50 billion, yeah.
Crazy. They set up this massive headquarters down in Memphis, Tennessee, and they have this army of over 500 researchers and engineers.
Right, and what those 500 engineers are operating is a supercomputer they call Colossus.
Colossus?
Yeah. This is an infrastructure armed with 200,000 NVIDIA H100 GPUs.
Wow.
For anyone trying to visualize that, you aren't just plugging in some graphics cards.
Right.
You are talking about powering a cluster so massive it requires the electrical draw of a small city just to keep the servers from melting.
It's practically its own power grid.
It really is. It's one of the largest, most densely packed training environments on Earth.
200,000 GPUs all churning at once. But, the hardware is really only half the story, right?
Absolutely.
What fascinates me is the raw data pipeline feeding that machine. Because GROK has native hardwired integration into what we all used to call Twitter.
Yep.
If you think about it, it's like having a tireless, heavily caffeinated journalist who just sits in a room and reads every single post.
Every single one.
Every breaking news alert, every heated argument from 500 million active monthly users in real time.
It is basically a real-time pulse on human consciousness.
Right, but my question is, how do you manage that? Because unfiltered human thought on the internet is,
A mess?
Yeah, it's basically a chaotic fire hose of noise, sarcasm, and, let's be honest, fake news.
Oh, for sure.
So is that integration GROK's ultimate superpower, or is it just a massive vulnerability waiting to happen?
Well, it's both. And that tension is the defining characteristic of this entire model.
Okay.
The real-time integration is a superpower because no other model can spot a global trend or a breaking news event faster.
Because it's hardwired to the feed.
Exactly. If an earthquake happens or some new crypto protocol drops, GROK sees the ripples in the water instantly. But you're entirely right about the vulnerability part. If you just feed an AI a raw, unfiltered feed of internet arguments, it will hallucinate wildly or just regurgitate toxic noise.
Which is exactly what happened with some of the earlier iterations, right?
Precisely. And that dual reality, needing the speed of the social feed but requiring really heavy filtering to make it usable, that explains why GROK's underlying architecture had to evolve so radically over the last couple of years.
Let's trace that evolution then, because they definitely didn't start at the heavyweight tier.
No, not at all.
They launched GROK 1 back in November 2023, and it was basically like a conversational parlor trick.
Yeah, it was a novelty.
Then GROK 3 arrived, bringing tools like deep search and an early think mode, which finally made it somewhat useful for research.
Right.
But the real pivot happened around GROK 4.20. And, in July 2025, Musk made this massive public claim.
Oh, I remember that.
He said GROK 4 operates at a, quote, PhD level in all subjects.
Which is quite the claim.
It is. Although, to his credit, he did offer a rare bit of modesty there. He admitted it hasn't, invented new technology or discovered revolutionary physics yet.
Which is an important distinction when we talk about what AI can actually do right now.
For sure.
But the architectural shift you mentioned, the one starting with version 4.20, that is the actual breakthrough.
I want to focus on that, actually, because XAI bucked a huge industry trend here.
They did.
If you look at Google or OpenAI, their strategy has historically been to build these massive monolithic brains.
Right.
It's the, lone genius approach to AI, just one giant model trying to know absolutely everything.
Yep.
But starting with 4.20, XAI leaned really heavily into a multi-agent system. To me, that sounds less like a lone super genius and more like a high-intensity study group.
That is actually a brilliant way to conceptualize it.
Oh, thanks.
Think about how a human study group works, right? If you give one person a complex calculus problem, they might make a simple arithmetic error on step 2.
And ruin the whole equation.
Exactly. But in a multi-agent AI system, you aren't relying on one single pass.
Yeah.
You have multiple instances of the AI taking on completely different roles.
Okay.
So one agent generates a potential answer, then a second agent acts as a critic and literally tries to find flaws in the first agent's logic.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and a third agent might be tasked purely with fact-checking the historical dates. They tackle the problem in parallel, they debate the pathways, and then they synthesize a final output.
So they are essentially double and triple checking each other's homework before they ever show the final answer to the user.
Exactly. And that collaborative architecture is the absolute foundation powering this new April 2026 release of GROK 4.3.
Okay, so if they're running a whole study group simultaneously, the engine required to run that must be monstrous.
Oh, it is.
What are the actual specs on 4.3?
It's massive. The full version is a 1 trillion parameter model.
A trillion.
Yeah, though the initial beta access rolls out at 500 billion.
Yeah.
Now, when we say parameters, think of those like the synapses in a human brain.
Okay.
It's the density of the connections the AI can make between different concepts. 1 trillion parameters means it has an incredibly deep, nuanced web of knowledge.
And what about its memory? How much information can you actually feed it at one time?
That's the context window. GROK 4.3 finalized a 1 million token context window in its April 30th API rollout.
Okay, wait. Break down what 1 million tokens actually looks like for the person listening.
Sure. So a token is roughly 3/4 of a word in English.
Okay.
So 1 million tokens means you could upload about 15 full-length, dense novels into the prompt box all at once.
That's absurd.
It really is. The AI can read all of them in seconds, and it can recall a tiny detail from chapter 2 of the first book while analyzing the climax of the 15th book.
Unbelievable.
And crucially, GROK 4.3 now has native video comprehension.
Meaning I don't have to, use a third-party tool to generate a transcript first. I can just drop an hour-long video file straight into the chat.
Right into the interface. It processes the audio and the visual frames natively alongside those 15 novels you just uploaded.
That's wild.
To handle all that, they've built out a very specific toolkit. They've upgraded Deep Search, which handles that real-time synthesis of the X-Firehose and the wider web.
Right.
And they've formalized the reasoning tools, Think Mode, and, what they're calling Big Brain Mode.
Big brain mode! You have to admit the marketing department there knows exactly what they're doing.
It's extremely on brand for XAI.
Very.
But marketing aside, the underlying mechanism is serious. Big Brain Mode is designed to directly rival OpenAI's O3 Mini and DeepSeek's R1.
Oh, really?
Yeah. When you toggle this on, the model utilizes significantly more compute time before it answers you.
Ah.
It maps out decision trees, it forces that multi-agent study group to argue through complex, multi-step logic problems, and verifies the math before it prints a single word.
Makes sense.
And if you don't need that deep reasoning, they released GROK 4.3 Fast, which spits out text at 207 tokens per second.
Okay, 207 tokens a second means it's writing a multi-page essay in the time it takes me to take a sip of coffee.
Basically, yeah.
The raw speed is incredible. The idea of feeding it a mountain of documents and a video at the same time is wild. But I have to play the skeptic here for a minute.
Please do.
Trillion parameter models and big brain modes sound great on a spec sheet, but do these numbers actually translate to winning the AI arms race, or is it just, flexing hardware?
That is the single most important question you can ask.
Right.
Because spec sheets lie, but benchmarks don't.
Exactly.
And the May 2026 benchmark data tells a very sobering story for everyone involved. The truth is, the landscape right now is the most competitive it has ever been in the history of AI.
Meaning?
Nobody wears the undisputed crown.
Okay, so how does the scorecard actually look? Where does Grok win, and where does it get knocked out?
Let's start with software engineering, which is basically the gold standard for utility right now.
Okay.
On the SWE Bench verified test, which measures an AI's ability to solve real, highly complex coding issues, pulled straight from GitHub Grok 4, leads the pack at 75%.
Wow.
Yeah, it just edged out GPT 5.4, which hit 74.9%, and Claude Opus 4.6 at 74%.
Hey, that is a razor-thin margin. We're talking tenths of a percent.
Exactly. It generated a massive wave of headlines for XAI. But if we look specifically at the new GROK 4.3 architecture, it actually lags 14 points behind Claude Opus 4.7 in that exact same coding environment.
Wait, what? A 14-point drop for the newer version?
Yep.
That's a massive regression in coding capability.
It's significant, yeah.
What about general reasoning and science?
In graduate-level science, Claude is still the undisputed king. The GPQA Diamond benchmark is a test written by PhDs in physics, chemistry, and biology.
Right, the really hard one.
Extremely hard.
Hmm?
It is specifically designed to be so obscure that the AI couldn't have possibly memorized the answers from his training data. Claude Opus 4.6 completely dominates there.
Okay, so Claude takes science.
But if we shift to long sequence agents, meaning tasks where the AI has to perform a long series of actions over time without losing track of its goal, GROK 4.3 shines.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it beats Opus 4.7 by 1.26 times on Vending Bench.
Interesting. And what about the big one? Humanity's last exam.
Oh, yeah.
For those listening who aren't deep in the weeds on this is an evaluation that researchers literally had to crowdsource from postdoctoral experts because the AIs kept maxing out every other standardized test we threw at them.
They broke all the other tests.
Exactly. So how does Grok handle the hardest test on Earth?
This is where that multi-agent study group really flexes its muscle.
Okay.
If you just ask the base GROK 4 model a question without letting it use extra tools, it scores 25.4%.
Which sounds low, but...
But remember, this test is brutally hard. That score actually beats OpenAI's O3 at 21% and Gemini 2.5 Pro at 21.6%.
Oh, wow.
But here's the kicker. When you let the GROK 4 Heavy version utilize its multi-agent tools to debate and double-check itself, it hits an astonishing 44.4%.
44.4%. Okay, so let me synthesize this for everyone listening because the picture is getting pretty complicated.
Go for it.
GPT 5.4 is still the most reliable overall generalist. Claude is the undisputed winner in hardcore science and nuanced, complex coding. Gemini still rules the multimodal space of combining images, text, and audio.
Yep.
And Grok has a slight edge in long sequence agents and certain multi-agent reasoning tasks.
That's a very fair summary.
So if we are basically looking at a technical tie across the industry, why is the corporate world suddenly freaking out over Grok 4.3?
Because the corporate world doesn't just look at the test scores.
Right.
They look at the invoice.
Ah, the invoice.
And XAI fundamentally rewrote the economics of artificial intelligence at the end of April 2026.
Give me the math. Like, how cheap are we actually talking?
Okay, for GROK 4.3's reasoning models, you are paying 1.25 per million input tokens.
Okay.
And 2.50 per million output tokens. And that incredibly fast version we mentioned earlier.
Grok fast, yeah.
It starts at that exact same $1.25 entry price.
Okay, but numbers in a vacuum are hard to visualize. How does that compare to the rest of the heavyweights in the ring?
Oh, it's a bloodbath. GPT 5.5 charges $2.50 for input and a massive $15 for output.
$15.
And Claude Opus 4.7.
Yeah.
Because of the specific way Anthropic designed its new tokenizer to handle data, Claude can actually end up being 8 to 10 times more expensive for complex, multi-file coding tasks compared to Grok.
Wait, 8 to 10 times more expensive?
Yeah.
Okay, that explains the disruptive entrance.
Right.
Like if you are a bootstrapped startup, say, down in Latin America, or you're a developer running a small tech firm, and you are processing hundreds of millions of tokens a month.
That price difference is everything.
Yeah, that's not just a fun perk. It's the difference between making payroll this quarter or shutting down the servers entirely. It creates incredible runway.
Exactly.
So let's get ruthlessly practical for the listener. Based on these massive cost savings, but also keeping in mind those weird benchmark regressions we talked about, what should they actually be using GROK 4.3 for today, and what is on the do not fly list?
That's the perfect way to look at it.
Okay,
You should absolutely use GROK 4.3 for real-time trend monitoring.
because of the X integration.
Right. If you need to know how the internet is reacting to a news event right this second, no one beats it.
Got it.
You should use it for analyzing massive, long documents because of that 1 million token context window. It is brilliant for rapid code prototyping, native video analysis, and setting up your own multi-agent workflows.
That's a solid list. And where does it fall apart? What should I strictly avoid?
Avoid it for spaghetti code.
Spaghetti code, okay.
Yeah, if you are working on a massive, complex, multi-file software project that has deep, subtle logic errors buried in the architecture, GROK will struggle.
Okay, good to know.
Claude is still significantly better at untangling dense architectural logic. GROK 4.3 builds fast prototypes, but it lacks the deep, nuanced memory required for messy debugging.
Makes sense.
Also, keep it away from persuasive marketing copy.
Really?
Yeah, it falls notably behind its competitors in generating high-quality, nuanced writing that actually converts customers without sounding robotic.
Fascinating. So the low cost makes it an absolute lifeline for cash-strapped startups who just need a prototype quickly. But enterprise adoption, we're talking Fortune 500 companies integrating this into their daily workflows. That relies on a lot more than just cheap, fast code.
It relies on trust.
Exactly. It relies on safety, compliance, and alignment, which naturally brings us to the heaviest baggage GROK carries.
It is the elephant in the room that dictates its entire market position right now.
We have to talk about GROK's personality and its political alignment.
Right.
By design, GROK's worldview inherently aligns with its creator. The model is programmed to be sarcastic, it is incredibly direct, and it is frequently and deliberately provocative.
Yes.
That is a massive, sharp contrast to a model like ChatGPT, which is heavily sanitized to prioritize absolute neutrality.
Completely different approaches.
And we also have to acknowledge that past versions of GROK had a well-documented history of generating highly inappropriate content before XAI finally applied their current safety filters.
They did. And this is where we need to be explicitly clear with you, the listener.
Yes, please.
We are not here to take a political stance. We are absolutely not endorsing the political viewpoints of the original source material, of Elon Musk, or of the AI itself.
100%.
Our job here is just to impartially report the reality of this model's behavior, because that behavior is a technical feature that directly impacts your ability to use it as a software product.
Exactly. Like, I don't care about the politics of the bot, I care about the liability.
Right.
So let me ask a pragmatic business question. Sarcasm and a provocative personality are, fantastic for driving engagement on social media.
Sure.
But can a heavily regulated fintech company or like a health tech startup dealing with sensitive patient data, can they legally rely on a beta AI that prides itself on being provocative and is still waiting on third-party bias audits?
The short answer is no.
Yeah.
And that is exactly why heavily regulated corporate environments are keeping GROK at arm's length right now. Compliance departments despise unpredictability. They do not want sarcasm anywhere near automated customer service or patient data. Until those independent bias audits are published, peer-reviewed, and verified, institutional trust is going to remain a massive, unyielding roadblock for GROK.
Which I imagine leads us directly into the broader systemic challenges XAI faces as we look at the rest of 2026.
It does.
Right, because for all the hype, the road ahead looks pretty turbulent. Based on the source material, GROK faces 5 major hurdles right now.
Let's walk through them.
First is what I call the endless sprint. We are just getting used to 4.3, but GROK 4.4, which is supposed to be the fully unlocked 1 trillion parameter model, is already expected in early May.
Which is an incredibly aggressive release schedule.
It's too aggressive. It is causing massive update fatigue. Developers and enterprise users just want a stable foundation to build their apps on, and XAI keeps shifting the ground underneath them every few weeks.
That's a huge pain point.
Second, as you just mentioned, they desperately need published independent audits to win over those institutional compliance checks.
This-
Third, they have a comparatively weak ecosystem.
That ecosystem gap is huge.
Mm.
If you look at Anthropic or OpenAI, they have spent years building massive libraries of third-party plugins, integration tools, and incredibly deep community documentation.
Right.
Developers know exactly how to plug ChatGPT into their existing software. XAI simply hasn't had the time to build that infrastructure yet.
Exactly. The fourth hurdle is the political polarization.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of how well the model performs on a coding test, Musk's public image in 2026 is highly polarizing. For a lot of risk-averse corporate boards, that polarization alone is enough for them to just exclude Grok from their vendor evaluations entirely.
It's a real factor.
And finally, the fifth hurdle. The scientific community is getting pretty restless.
Oh, they are.
They are demanding hard mathematical evidence, not just optimistic timelines, regarding Musk's constant claims that XAI is on the verge of achieving artificial general intelligence, or AGI.
Right. Those 5 hurdles represent a massive friction point for wide-scale adoption.
But looking at this whole playbook, the aggressive pacing, the massive price cuts, launching products that are clearly unpolished just to grab market share and, worrying about the ecosystem later.
Yeah.
Is this just the classic Tesla strategy applied to artificial intelligence? You get to the market first, iterate at breakneck speed, slash the prices to starve the competition, and basically build the airplane while you're flying it.
That is precisely what we are witnessing. It is a strategy optimized entirely for velocity and market disruption rather than immediate perfection.
Right.
And even if it alienates some heavily regulated enterprises, it fundamentally changes the market dynamics for every other player in the space.
So let's bring all of this together for a final verdict for the listener.
Let's do it.
The reality of GROK 4.3 is that it is a highly capable, architecturally innovative model. The multi-agent study group approach is a genuine step forward in reasoning. It is incredibly cheap, making it an absolute lifeline for bootstrap startups, especially, like we saw in the reports, extending the runway for the Latin American and Spanish-speaking tech ecosystems that just need massive context windows without breaking the bank.
Huge advantage there. But it is also highly opinionated.
Very.
It struggles with the nuances of creative marketing copy, it fumbles complex legacy code, and it carries the polarizing, unpredictable weight of its creator, making it a compliance nightmare for the Fortune 500.
But here's the ultimate takeaway. GROK 4.3 does not need to be the undisputed, flawless, smartest model ever created.
No, it doesn't.
Because by simply existing at this price point, it is forcing Google, Anthropic, and OpenAI to abandon their massive margins and completely change their defensive strategies.
It proves that the era of simply throwing more expensive hardware at a massive single model is over.
Yeah.
Efficiency, multi-agent architecture, and raw cost-effectiveness matter just as much as scale now.
Which brings us right back to that boxing ring we started in. The heavyweight fight is getting cheaper, it's getting faster, and it is getting incredibly crowded.
That it is.
And it leaves me with one final thought I want you, the listener, to mull over as we wrap up today.
What's that?
If the future of AI is moving away from these massive, omniscient, lone genius models and shifting towards swarms of cheap, specialized, multi-agent study groups that are just battling it out on price,
Okay.
does AGI eventually become less of a grand sci-fi awakening and more of just an invisible, dirt-cheap commodity that we basically rent by the millisecond?
Man, that really is the trillion-dollar question for the industry, isn't it?
We'll leave you to think about that one. Keep questioning, keep learning, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.